Hi everyone, my name is Dennis and this is my quick start guide to my app called GridTracks Part 2. And so this tutorial is more for people who want to recap about accounting, like they're familiar but they still need like a bit of a slower recap. If you just want like a really quick guide, you might just want to check out my other video where I go it's just a demo of everything there is to GridTracks like very quickly. And so for this one, it's the balance sheet, income statement, preparations for the next accounting period, and exporting to Excel. The part one was about the general journal and the general ledger. Right. So basically, previously I'd shown you how to create both accounts in the general ledger as well as entries in the general journal. And sort of one of the main purposes of even bothering to do that is so that you can see the balance sheet and the income statement. And so the really nice thing about GridTracks is that it actually creates a balance sheet and income statement for you automatically. However, there are some settings that do need to be applied to sort of customize these statements. Right, so this is what a balance sheet looks like in GridTracks. You can see that I have all my assets here, sorted by ID, total assets at the bottom. Of course, I have my liabilities, sorted by ID, total liabilities here, and then of course I have my change in equity. And so this is the date before any transactions have been applied, sort of the net income, the drawings or dividends, and then of course change in equity as well as sort of the balance at the very end. And of course you can see here that total assets is equal to total liabilities plus equity, which is what you would expect because it satisfies the fundamental accounting equation. Right, so the income statement basically just consists of all your revenue accounts subtracted by all your expenses. And like again, these are also sorted by account ID. And you can see here that in this particular scenario, I actually have a net loss of $196.28. And so if you go back to the end of the balance sheet in the change in equity section, you'll notice that the net income matches up, which is what you would expect. Right. So in terms of what you need to customize in the balance sheet and income statement are number one, the company name here in orange, the end date here in green, and the start date in blue. So the company name represents the name of your company, whether it's your own name, whether you have a company name. And so that will show up as the name, finances. So in blue, you have the start date. The start date represents the date before any entries have been submitted. And the end date is the date after all entries have been submitted. But you don't have to put the dates like right on the entries. You can like set them however you want, provided that they're before and after. I'll go into it a little bit later. But right, so the income statement also follows this sort of thing. So you have your company name, and then of course you have your start period and your end period as well. Right, so this is the GridTracks document, sample document that I made. And so, I have a bunch of accounts here in the general ledger, as you can see, and I also have some quick journal view, like over here maybe. And then of course you have maybe like general ledger, as I mentioned, general journal. And so the thing I want to take you to first is summary data. And you can see here, obviously, I have my balance sheet, right? As I showed you earlier, and I have my income statement. And so right now it says Dennis Ho's Finances. And that's because if I go to my settings page, you'll notice that the company name is Dennis Ho. So if I change this to the Fresh Cupcaker, you'll notice that if I come back to summary data, now it's updated to the Fresh Cupcaker. As well, you'll see that in my balance sheet, the starting date was July 1st, end date is August 1st, and the income statement, it's the same. If you go to settings, you'll notice that I have manually assigned my start date to July 1st and my end date to August 1st. But like assigning a manually assigned start date and end date are actually optional. If you uncheck these two, what's going to happen is the start date is going to be set to the very first journal entry, and the end date will be set to the very last journal entry. So you can see here in my general journal, that my first entry was on July the 4th, and my last was on July the 14th. And you'll see if I come to summary data now, that the start date is July the 4th, the last day is July 14th, as well as here July 14th. And in the income statement, you'll see now July 4th to July 14th. Right, I'm just going to change these back to July 1st and August 1st. And of course, if you come back to here, you'll see it's updated again. Right, so that's pretty much all you need to really do with the income statement and balance sheet since everything else is done for you. Right, so I'm just going to take you back to the PowerPoint. And so, right, so the next thing to consider is preparing for the next accounting period. And so basically, like, the issue is that, so everything that you put into your general journal ends up being like, sorry, all your transactions end up going into your general journal, which means that if you have like one general journal over the course of 3 months, it will become very long and it might be a little unwieldy. Also, by splitting the file up into separate components, you can get snapshots of your balance sheet for like at the end of each month, and of course your income statement as well. So basically, GridTracks makes it really easy for you to create a new setup for the next accounting period. And so if you come down here to the settings page and you come down to make accounts for the next accounting period, you can click on this button and it'll take you to a save dialog box where you can create a new GDT file. And what it's going to do is it's actually going to take all these active accounts here and it's going to copy them over into the new file. And all these final values here will be reassigned as the starting values in the new file. And you basically would be starting over for the month of August, and you would of course add journal entries to your empty general journal, and you would keep adding, and then maybe at the end of August you would create a new file, right, using this button, and it would have all your accounts still, and then of course with the new final values that you would see. And so essentially, so that's like sort of the first part about making a new file. But there's also this thing called a closing entry. And so basically, what is a closing entry? Well, closing entry is when you're dealing with the end of a fiscal year. And so what's going to happen is that, so during the fiscal year, you keep track of revenues, expenses, drawings, and dividends, so you have an idea of where your money is going in terms of changes to equity. But at the end of the year, you're going to want to assign all these values to 0 and merge everything with equity and then start over and see how much profit you made the next year, what are your expenses for the next year, and so on and so forth. So GridTracks actually makes it really, really easy for you to apply closing entries to your journal, and that will basically take all your sort of expenses, revenues, set them to 0, and then apply those changes directly to owner's equity. And right, so GridTracks makes it really easy to do this. You just scroll up in the settings page and you'll see this thing called setup closing entries. And I can pick a date to do the closing entry. So the date has to be on or after the last journal entry and on or before the manually assigned end date, which I'm just going to scroll this down so you can see a little better. Manually, it has to be before the manually assigned end date. Notice that if I change the end date to like to the 20th, now I can't really. Oh, if I assign it to July the 20th, then I can't really pick anything after the 20th. But I'm just gonna set this back to August 1st. And right, so the next part is this thing called file net income. And so the issue here is that GridTracks assumes that there's a possibility that you may have more than one equity account if you have a business with a partner. So it allows you to distribute the net income amongst your different equity accounts. Of course, we only have one in this case, so I'm just going to assign it to 303.72, right? And so now I can apply my closing entry. And if I come to my journal now, you'll see that my closing entry has been applied. And so as I mentioned here in the PowerPoint, that once you apply your closing entry, you cannot add, edit, or delete anything within the general ledger or the general journal. And that's just because when you're applying the closing entry, GridTracks is assuming that you're not going to add any more entries because you're basically saying, okay, I'm done with the document because I've applied closing entries. So you can't no longer add, edit, or delete transactions, nor can you add, edit, delete here, nor can you edit, delete, or add here as well. Right. So here's just a little bit of a more closer view of sort of what a closing entry looks like. So typically speaking, revenue accounts have a credit balance. So these are all debited to bring the value back to 0. Of course, your expense balances typically have a debit balance. So you would typically want to credit them to bring the value to 0. And of course, net equity here, we have a profit of $303.72. So you want to credit net equity by that amount. Right, and of course, like if it had been a net loss, then you would see this under the debit section, and if like anything weird happened in the revenue expenses, that would also be the case. And of course, these are all sorted by account ID, as you would expect. And finally, the description is automatically generated as closing entry. And actually, if you come here to the general ledger, you can see that if I click on maybe like cupcake sales, closing entry has been applied. If I go to utility expense, closing entry has been applied, and so on and so forth. Right, so at this point, I just want to talk to you about one more thing before we go on to exporting to Excel. And that's something that I skipped in the general journal and general ledger tutorial, and that's these two actions right here, which is the deprecation and deletion of accounts. So first I'm just going to get rid of the closing entry so that I can sort of modify stuff again. And so basically, so the purpose of deleting an account from the general ledger is if you made a mistake. So maybe, so you'll notice that I have this customer called John Smith, accounts receivable, and I realized that I credited him at the beginning of the month because I thought he was going to be a customer, but he ended up sort of canceling out, and I realized I don't really need him anymore for the month. So provided that an account has no general ledger posts in it, I can delete it, and this will just get rid of it. And so this is more, like I mentioned earlier, this is more for when you make a mistake, when you create an account by accident, and you realize, oh yeah, I don't really need this anymore, so I'm going to delete it. So, right. So basically, the thing to be wary about is that GridTracks allows you to delete accounts with the starting value that's non-zero, which means that if you delete an account that has a non-zero starting value, well, your debits and your credits aren't going to be equal to each other anymore. And instead, the difference will be non-zero. And so while GridTracks doesn't like warn you per se, like it doesn't like give you a big red exclamation mark that's telling you that it's not balanced, you should really come here to make sure that it's balanced. Also, the modify accounts page is a great page to get a bird's eye view of everything. So like you generally want to come down here anyways to sort of see what's going on. Right, so that's the deletion of accounts. Deprecation of accounts is a little bit more complicated. And the purpose of deprecation of accounts is, so like let's look at, so I'm just gonna bring back John Smith through undo, redo. But right, so basically with the deprecation of accounts, it's more for if you have a customer who had transactions in the past with you, but are no longer. So maybe I had an AR for Emily Cash for the past 3 months, but in this for the month of August, she's telling me that she's switching to a different supplier and she's no longer going to be a customer with us. So I may want to remove Emily Cash from subsequent files when I file for the next accounting period, and that is where deprecation of accounts comes in. So you can deprecate any account that has general ledger posts in it. It's just that the account must have a final value of $0. So for example, if I go to, I noticed earlier that Emily Cash owes me $78.95. I can actually see that here really quickly if I show you. Right, $78.95. So I can come here and say that Emily Cash paid off her AR. And I'm just gonna say that I profited through bank, and that I'm gonna deduct that from her AR account. And I'm just gonna accept changes now. Right. So basically, if I come to accounts, you'll see that my current value is $0. And what that means is I can hit the star right here, and now it becomes an empty star. And what that means is that the account is deprecated. And actually, if you go to the modify accounts, you can also see right here in Emily Cash that the account's deprecated. If I want, I can obviously make it active again. And of course, I can also delete accounts here as well if I wanted to, just as a side note. But right, so when you deprecate an account, what that means is that it's not going to show up in the next file account period because it's deprecated. I can also like, just a side note, that I can also like deprecate my accounts here as well. Note that I can't deprecate something like this because it has a non-zero starting value, but I could if I wanted to deprecate maybe transportation expense because it has a $0 final value. Oh, sorry, I meant final value. It has a $0 final value. Right, so deprecate accounts do not show up in the next accounting period. And so, right, so the last thing to note is that when you have a deprecated account, you can no longer delete, edit, or add transactions that contain this account, nor can you edit the deprecated account. And this is more of a fail-safe because if you were to edit the starting value, or if you were to create transactions involving this account, it might reassign the current value to something other than $0, which would then break the program because the whole point of deprecating an account is that its final value is $0. Right, so that is pretty much everything when it comes to GridTracks. So I'm just going to take you to the homepage really quickly. You can actually like toggle to, you can see like the headers, which tell you the total amounts of each type of account. And of course you can like click on this to see this account directly. If I want to see maybe my bank loan, I can just click on this. Of course I have my recently opened files. This trash can will actually just get rid of the link as a recently opened file, but it will not delete the file itself in your actual hard disk. Don't worry about that. Finally, you can also like jump really quickly to specific dates to see if you have any journal entries. You can sort of toggle directly back to the journal. You can also edit this particular transaction. And of course, you can also add a new transaction either on this date or on the current date, which is up to you. You can just go to modify accounts here, which takes you to this grid view again. Right, so the last thing I want to tell you is that you can also actually export to Excel. And that's as simple as just clicking on this thing right here, going to save as, and then hitting export Excel, which will bring you to a dialog box. You can save your Excel document. And so here is an Excel file that you can see here. You can see here that this is sort of a snapshot of when I exported it. You can see here I have my general journal, as you would expect. I have my balance sheet here, automatically generated, my income statement, and of course all my accounts in my general ledger. And it also has the starting values listed here because you can't really see the starting value unless you really look. Right, so that is pretty much all there is to GridTracks. The last thing I'm going to cover in part 3 is actually the cash sales receipt, but that's like a pretty quick, maybe no more than 10-minute tutorial. Anyways, yeah, so thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoy using the app. Yeah, thanks so much. All right, bye.